Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, or as we like to call it, the Try It Podcast, where we try not to mess the podcast up. And today, we're going to read a chapter of my book, promotion for the book, which is available on Amazon for pre-order, and is officially coming out on February 3rd. And eventually, if I can get them uploaded, they will also be available on Apple, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and anywhere else I can think of that will give me money. So there you go. So we're going to do the first chapter of the book. And if you like it and you don't think my writing sucks, you can get the rest of it. Or you can join Substack and read the Starward Exiles. I'm just going to keep advertising things till we get this figured out. All right. Starward Exiles is about an alien invasion and the Second Nordic War. Are we ready?
I'm ready.
If you want to read that sci-fi serial, go to my Substack, Gary Paul Varner, at GaryPaulVarner.com. GaryPaulVarner.com, GaryPaulVarner.com. All right, are we ready?
Well done. I swear I had this fixed.
I feel like a used car salesman.
I spent like 30 minutes fixing this, and it was ready to go, and then we get here, and it's like, oh,
it's all going to blow up at the 11th hour, you know? So...
11:20.
11:20. All right. Okay. Are we ready?
I think Freddy's ready.
All right. We'll see how this goes. The Familiar, Chapter 1. If you want to meet a vampire, go to a hospital. I chuckled and shook my head. 3 days. Madeline said 3 days. If that was true, then tonight my grandmother would rise from the dead. My name is Jerome. I'm a familiar. It's such a friendly term, isn't it? When someone says familiar, they're thinking of people and things they know. No one considers the word slave. A familiar is someone who allows a vampire to suck their blood. People who know the term usually assume the familiar is...
suck your blood.
Pretty much. It's all right. The familiar... I'm all turned around. Darn you, Trevor. Okay. People who know the term usually assume the familiar is hoping the vampire will turn them. This isn't always true. Some of us are just poor. There was a sudden gust of wind, which stole what remained of the heat I'd managed to save under my jacket. Shivering, I pulled out a cigarette, the last in the pack, and with trembling hands, I raised the cigarette to my blue lips and pulled out a lighter. The flickering flame teased the edge for a full minute before igniting the tobacco, giving me plenty of time to remember that bumming to smoke was how I'd fallen into this mess in the first place. 2 years ago, my life was a blur of hospital visits and one echoing word: cancer. My parents had died in gutters on the back end of Who Gives a Shit, and all I had in the world was my grandmother. The cancer struck fast, and we had no money. I remember sitting by her bedside one night, crying when I knew she was asleep. The hospital was lousy. I don't even think the bed sheets were properly cleaned. Nurses can be apathetic pricks. One particular abomination to human decency shuffled into the room on hams for legs and curtly told me visiting hours were over. I looked at her, eyes pleading for another minute to collect myself, but she met my gaze with a snort, as if telling mourning family members to buzz off was the only pleasure left in her miserable life. She waddled to the door and held it open, staring at me like an ogre guarding her post. I stood up and left my grandmother alone with the ogre, giving her a reproachful glare as I passed by. She met my gaze with a smug grin. I went to the waiting room and cried some more. I didn't have anywhere else to go. Our house was across town, and I had no money for a cab. I'd spent the last of my college grant on textbooks and was just trying to survive until next semester's check. As I sat there, weeping, I noticed a woman with green hair like seaweed. She wore an expensive suit with a fancy overcoat and sunglasses. Since we were in a hospital, I assumed she'd been crying and didn't want anyone to see. She maintained the stiff, proper disposition people carry when they're trying not to draw attention to themselves. Baffled by seeing a woman of green hair dressed in a business suit, I stared at the woman until she looked my direction. She smiled. I smiled back, then returned to my tears. Eventually, I glanced up and noticed a sign for a smoking section outside. I rose with a final disgusting sniffle, wiping snot on my arm. I buttoned my jacket and walked out, waiting for someone who smoked in the hopes of borrowing a cigarette. It didn't take long to meet a fellow who was having the same kind of day I was. He took one look at me and pulled out a cigarette and a lighter. I took the death stick as he flicked the lighter and held the open flame over the cigarette's edge with trembling hands. I puffed until it was lit, then gave the man a grateful nod. He returned the gesture, and the two of us smoked in silence. It was cold, not one of those brisk nights with bright stars, but a night carrying a bland overcast and a faint mist. Before long, the man dropped his half-finished cigarette and stamped it out on the damp sidewalk. I remained, determined to ride the small nicotine high for all it was worth. I didn't hear her behind me. One moment I was alone, the next she was there, looking at the cloudy sky. "Having a bad day?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Grandma." She nodded. "Typical in a place like this. I'm Madeline. Jerome. Would you like another lung dart?" I blinked at her, confused. Then she pulled out a packet of cigarettes, and I gave her a small smile and nodded. I took the second cigarette and held it in my fingers while I finished smoking what I had. "Thanks." She nodded and lit a cigarette of her own. We stood for a while, saying nothing. When I'd lit the second cigarette using what remained of the first one, she asked, "What's wrong with your grandma?" I tossed the first cigarette onto the sidewalk and told her my story. The whole time I was speaking, I never wondered why this attractive girl was paying attention to me. I just kept jabbering as she nodded sympathetically. After taking a deep drag and letting out a quivering sigh, I ended my monologue by saying, "So yeah, cancer. The doctors don't know what kind and say they can't do anything. The doctors here don't seem to know much. It's a shame you can't take her someplace better." "I would if I had the money," I said. "Where?" I shrugged. "I know there was a cancer treatment center in Tulsa. Maybe I could find a decent doctor there." "Perhaps." She stared at me, her green eyes bright and intense, with a kind of focus I'd never seen before. The sound of passing cars and the typical noises of the city's nightlife drifted away. I felt trapped in a bubble of frozen time and space. "I want you to do me a favor," she said, a small smile growing on her perfect lips. "I want you to take me seriously. What if I could give you the money?" Any sane person would have been thinking, what's the catch? What does she want? Anything that sounds too good to be true probably is. But what can I say? I was desperate. I looked at her and started to hope. I don't know. I'd be grateful, I guess. Madeline broke our gaze, turning and staring into the night. She grinned. "It's not free. Nothing is. But I can give you the money." "Look, lady, I'm willing to do whatever, but I can't promise I'd be very good at it." I was so shocked these words came from my mouth, I almost cut my hands over my face like a bashful schoolgirl. My eyes fell to the concrete as I dropped the cigarette and prepared to do whatever. She laughed. It sounded radiant and sinister. I don't know if I've ever met somebody so eager. "Okay, here is what I want you to do. I want you to look at me. I want you to look at me, and when you see it, don't run away. If you run, I'll be gone. You won't get your money. Do you understand?" Sure. Okay." She turned and met my eyes. Then she opened her mouth. Her canines grew into fangs. They simply elongated until they were pressing against her bottom lip. I don't know why I didn't run back into the hospital screaming. I knew what she was the instant I saw those teeth. My mind didn't race through a list of ridiculous explanations. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't an illusion. The teeth were real. She was real. I stared at those fangs in wonder and even awe. I stepped toward her, and she took a step back. "Do you know what I am?" I nodded. "You're not afraid?" "I don't know." Madeline gave me an odd look, an expression that communicated both charm and chagrin. "Here's the deal," she began, taking on a businesslike tone. "You let me feed on you, I give you the money. Some people say vampires have a certain hypnotic ability. They can erode a person's will, make them do whatever they want, but she didn't need to hypnotize me. I can't imagine I'm the first person she'd ensnared at a hospital. Besides, I wasn't afraid. I'm not going to say I wanted to feel her teeth in my neck, that I wanted to be a vampire, but at the time, the risk didn't seem real to me. "One feeding?" She shook her head. "No. I will pay you so much for each session, but it will be more than enough to afford your grandmother's treatments, and you'll have plenty extra. Won't I turn into a vampire? It'll be years before you have to worry about that, but if it isn't something you want, then write a will and tell your family you wish to be cremated. You don't have to turn. Will it hurt?" "No." It's one of the most pleasurable experiences you'll ever have. I wish I could say I asked more questions, been more hesitant, but I didn't, and I wasn't. I said, okay. It was that simple. She led me to some back alleyway. She took off her clothes, all of them. They say vampires are uncommonly beautiful, and this is absolutely true. She took off my pants and had me lay on the cold cement, felt around my leg, and bit my calf. The vampire was right. It was pleasurable. There's no other way to describe it. When she was done, I wanted her to do it more, and I could tell she wanted to continue feeding, but instead she sat up and reached into her pile of clothes, pulling out a package of baby wipes from her coat pocket. She wiped the blood from her mouth and body and wrapped my wound with some gauze from her purse. It wasn't thorough work, just enough to stop the bleeding. She took me to a nearby hotel. There, we showered and she wrote a check. Madeline told me good night and promised to see me again. It wasn't an incredible sum of money, but it was more than I'd seen in my young life. The following day, I went to the nearest bank, certain the check would bounce. It didn't, and I left the bank with thousands of dollars in my pocket. I returned to the hospital, paid the ogres in charge of billing, and had my grandmother discharged the same afternoon. I took her to Tulsa. It wasn't long before my grandma's cancer was in remission, and we were living in a nearby suburb. The cigarette finished, I stamped it out on the soft mound of freshly torn earth. I placed a hand on the tombstone and looked at the photo of my grandmother grafted into the granite. She never could have afforded such a marker without Madeline's money. Was that ironic or just plain horrible? She wasn't supposed to get involved. Taking a step forward, I hit the tombstone with a clenched fist. The supernatural isn't supposed to be so mundane. The word mundane sounded strange coming from my mouth. It wasn't part of my regular vocabulary, but I couldn't think of a better way to describe the experience. I couldn't call the last 2 years normal, but my feeding sessions with the vampire had seemed so insignificant. She showed up at our door twice a month. We'd go on what could only be described as a date or stay in the apartment while she watched me eat pizza, stroking my hair and gazing at me with those dark green, fathomless eyes. When she was gone, my encounters with her would fade from my mind. I'd forget how her fangs grew, how when she watched me, she wouldn't move or breathe. Things were just so comfortable. It's possible the vampire wanted me to feel safe, so I wouldn't pay attention to her real target. My grandmother was wounded, weak, and Madeline was a predator. Eventually, the vampire disappeared, and when my grandmother died, it was sudden. I'd woken up that morning and found her just gone. I'm sorry, I told the tombstone. I should have checked. I could have done that much. I don't expect you to forgive me, but before you wake, know how sorry I am. If I could change things, I would. She isn't rising, Jerome. I turned and saw the vampire behind me. Seething, I screamed, 6 months! You've been gone 6 months, and a week after she dies, you show up? I can't think of a better way to admit I didn't kill her. Why should I believe you? Did you check her for a bite? My mouth. I opened my mouth to scream that of course I had, but it was a lie. I just said the opposite a second earlier. No doubt she heard me, which was probably why she'd chosen to reveal herself. I closed my mouth and stared at the mound of dirt. Of course you didn't, Madeline said. You wanted to believe it was me. You couldn't accept that the doctors were wrong. People build their narratives, Jerome, and they love to turn creatures like me into the villain. I can't say I'm surprised, but I'm a little hurt. I looked up at her, feeling ashamed, but also wondering if I should feel guilty for assuming the obvious. She was a vampire. What else was I supposed to think? Madeline raised an eyebrow, a small smile growing on her lips. Was your plan to let her feed on you? That's not very noble. She'd kill others. What about Nancy? I blinked, then looked back down at the ground. More shame twisted my stomach in knots as I realized I would have turned my grandmother into a killer. Then that shame was overwhelmed by horror when I remembered the vampire had said my fiance's name. I fell to my knees. My fingers dug into the mud. I ground my teeth. Why couldn't I do anything right? My death was supposed to protect her. How do you know about her? I whispered. Madeline shook her head. Jerome, I left because of your anemia. My supply of familiars in the States is thin, and I was using you too much. You needed to rest, so I returned to Italy. But I never forgot about you, and much has changed in the last 6 months. Stay away from her, I muttered. I have no ill will toward your lover, Madeline said. I was gone, and your grandmother was ailing. Nancy served as an adequate substitute. She's not a substitute, I hissed. I love her. Don't you love me too? The vampire purred. I glared at her. Madeline only smiled. She approached me and offered her hand. When I didn't take it, she swooped her arms under my shoulders and lifted me from the mud. She did this so quickly I never saw her motion. The vampire looked me up and down and brushed the caked dirt from my jacket and jeans. Backing away, she nodded, satisfied. Jerome, I can't convince you of my innocence. I understand this. You're a man, a mortal who has lost someone dear. You're incapable of rational thought. I opened my mouth to argue, but she raised a brisk hand. But I want you to know that you can keep your Nancy. I like the girl. There's no need for competition. You can have both. To demonstrate this fact, I want you to attend a party. I'll be leaving tomorrow. Tonight, I'm going to give you a check and an address. My grandmother just died, I said. And you want me to go to a party? I've kept a lot of things from you. You had obligations. Madeline tilted her head toward the tombstone. Obligations that are no longer relevant. Nancy does complicate matters, but the problem is manageable. You'll see. I looked back at my grandmother's grave. I wanted to tell the vampire no, but did I really have a choice? What would she do if I denied the offer? What would happen if I ended our arrangement? And what if Madeline had really killed my grandmother? Would I ever know? And could I keep letting her use me, knowing she might have murdered my only real parent? Did any of these questions matter? I sighed and shook my head, defeated. Of course they didn't. Not if I wanted to see the dawn. Fine, I said. Madeline nodded. Good. Now, I need to feed, and you need your check. She casually stripped out of her clothes as if she weren't standing over a grave. I looked over my shoulder at the face of my smiling grandmother, forever etched in granite, and undid my pants. Madeline knelt and jerked my pants down to my ankles. She bit the wound on my calf as I stared at the curtain of darkness surrounding the trees, feeling the euphoria of her venom and the blood leaving my body. When she was done, she stood, pulling up my pants and readjusting my clothing until she was certain everything was properly aligned. Then she gathered her clothes in her arms and pulled from a pocket the check that was already filled out. I took the check, and she then offered me a scrap of paper which had her address. I took it as well, examined the address, and when I looked back at her, she was smiling. The vampire kissed my cheek. You'll believe me in time, she whispered in my ear. With that, Madeline vanished. I turned to the tombstone. Blood smeared my grandmother's picture. Did she do that on purpose? I knelt, wiping the blood from her image, and wept. And that's chapter 1.
That's crazy. I like it.
Thank you, sir. So, there's my ad. I'll do one more scene from the book before it comes out on February.
Okay.
So.
That was pretty good.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. How much time did we kill?
I'm not sure. When did we start it?
I wasn't looking.
We got about 20 minutes into it, I think.
So that took about 20 minutes, huh? All right, hang on. I know how to do this. Yeah, so... No, it's not giving me a time set. 18 minutes. Okay, so we got another 5 minutes to kill.
5 minutes.
To make this a podcast. So, let's think here. So, yeah, that is The Familiar. Obviously, it's about a vampire and a guy who doesn't want to be the vampire's slave. And, sorry, go on.
Well, I had a question and I lost it.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
My bad. Oh, no, the vampire knows about his fiancée, who will later become his wife, and not hilarity, but, you know, the vampire wants his wife, so that's basically the plot of the book. There's some other things that happen, too. He ends up killing a few vampires and all sorts of fun stuff.
Why does the vampire want his wife or fiancée?
Because Nancy looks. That's the idea. Basically, it's a little complicated, but the vampire kind of has this attitude that people don't really like. They like basically hang out with her because she's scared of her, you know, like they're scared of her. And Nancy is naturally curious and inquisitive, and the vampire finds that charming. And so the vampire ends up becoming obsessed. And also, Jerome bows up to her, which she likes. And so she also wants to grab Nancy as a way to kind of keep him in her pocket. So it's both she really likes Nancy and she's also manipulating Jerome into staying with her.
Is there any like the the pleasure he feels like at all, is it any of that sexual, or is it just the euphoric losing of blood type thing?
I haven't really decided. I think it's kind of both.
Okay,
So it's like it's an aphrodisiac is kind of how I pictured it. You know what I mean?
I gotcha.
So it's like being high.
Yeah,
Really, the familiar is kind of it's an allegory for addiction. I kind of, one of the reasons I've always found like vampires so interesting is, yeah, I always felt like that compulsion component for the like the lusting for blood and that kind of thing. I always thought it kind of served as,
yeah,
yeah, an allegory is something that takes over somebody. So I wanted to write the book from that angle.
makes sense of the whole bloodlust type
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. So, and also I don't like vampires that, I mean, Twilight was fine for what it was, but I'm not a fan of vampires that sparkle. So I wanted to do something different. So,
Sparkling vampires.
yeah,
Is there
yeah.
any is there anything that sets your vampires apart from everyone else's?
In my opinion, yes. I tried very hard to go like lean with the actual Gothic model. That is to say, like the crucifixes actually work. They're not like boy, like it's not like Buffy the Vampire Slayer where everybody's got like a complex and
Yeah, I never watched that one.
yeah. Well, the thing that kind of makes me angry about the whole vampire lore is in the modern day they're always trying to like cheat what it was about.
Yeah.
And the Bram Stoker, which I need to do a review on this. I've been planning on doing a review on this for this channel, but I want to make the case that Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker that came out in the early 2000s is actually a freaking terrible movie, and I hate it. And I want to like attack it with everything I have because everybody's always like, oh, the Dracula from Francis Ford Coppola, it's so amazing. I'm like, no, it's not. It's awful. It's absolutely awful because the thing about the vampire novel in the 1800s, like Dracula, is that at the time hypnosis was a big thing. It's still a Christian culture, and it's rejecting the idea of dualism, this idea that good and evil are just a matter of perspectives and they're equal countervailing forces. Like evil is a distortion, like it's a perversion. And
Yeah.
so the thing that's horrifying about the vampire in Bram Stoker's book is that it's a corrupting element. So, for example, Lucy in the Coppola version is like she's like a whore in the movie. She's like flirting with this man and she's a tease and they treat her like this scandalous person. But in the book, she's very virtuous. She's very good. And she's so good and virtuous that there's three men that like her. She makes a comment in the book about how she wishes she could marry all of them instead of just having to pick one. But that's because she likes all of them too. It's not because she's a tease. And that's important because in the book, she later becomes the lady in white and ends up killing a bunch of kids. And the idea behind that is that there is this there's this corrupting, distorting nature to evil that warps good. That's what makes the vampire scary,
Yeah.
is that it takes what somebody is and warps them.
Yep.
Instead, the freaking Coppola version does this weird, stupid reincarnation narrative and acts like, oh, good and evil's just a matter of perspective and all that hippie new age crap or
Yeah.
modern relativist crap, I guess. And I hate that. I hate that because the scary thing about the vampire is the loss of self. And
Yeah. That's
so going into the corrupting nature of evil. Now, does it like my characters are still sentient, like the vampires are still people in that respect, but the idea of like evil actually being corrupting is
yeah.
what I wanted to write about.
I gotcha. Kind of like not really, but underworld's vampires. There's the battle against lichens. Werewolves.
Yeah.
They're not actually like trying to be evil or anything. They're just trying to survive, just like everybody else.
Yeah, yeah. They're a little closer to the vampires in Underworld. The big difference would be though, like the hunger, like the bloodlust is
Yeah.
it's like a parasitic demon type of thing. So it's actually like an active force that's, trying to manipulate them.
Yeah.
So I was trying to hone in on that more specifically. That whole, again, corrupting nature of evil thing. So, sorry, I didn't mean to rant, but I like what vampires could be, but I kind of hate what they are in our culture.
Yeah.
So I wanted to write what I thought a vampire should be, I guess.
So far, I like it. So.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Hopefully other people enjoyed it too.
Read it when I get it. See how it turns out.
I hope you like it. You're a subscriber to the newsletter, so you should have got excuse me. You should have got the short story that I'm using as a launch leader for the newsletter. Like if you subscribe,
I did see that. I didn't read it, but I did see it.
Yeah, well, if you want to get another facet of it, it's there. So it kind of takes place between from Jerome's timeline between book 1 and book 2 of his point of view. So
sweet.
Yeah. So it's there. And use Car Salesman Line. If you want to subscribe to the newsletter, you can get that short story too. I hate this crap. I hate marketing. I hate it. Anyway. So
like and subscribe.
Like, share, subscribe, follow, share, subscribe, like. So anyway. Okay, I think I've ranted enough to earn this to make this an episode of the podcast. So I think we're good. Sweet. All right. I did catch one typo in there though. Dadgum, that makes me
Yeah, I saw one. I was like, oh.
Yeah, that's the other infuriating thing about writing. I went over this thing countless times for years, and you always find something.
Always, every time.
It's infuriating. I don't know if it's because things get changed as you make edits, and then stuff kind of gets moved around and shifted. But it just seems like there's always a new copyright. So
yeah, I don't know
or a copy editing issue.
I don't know how editors can do that. Just read and be like, oh, there's a problem. Fix.
Well, that's why they have like teams of editors. Like in like traditional publishing houses, there's like 12 editors because there's just always stuff. So, all right, well, guys, that's all we have for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you were watching this on the live stream, stay with us. We got one more segment left. If you are watching this after the fact, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
See you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Faith, Fiction, and Folklore. If you did, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Rumble. We can also be found on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Thank you again very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.